What's going on, everyone? Welcome to our next episode of the Justice Revolution. I am your host, James the Patriot. I got with me one of my ever so faithful co-hosts, Justice. Say hello, Justice.
Good morning, everyone.
Well, that was a little less lackluster. Come on, get a little more oomph into this. This is Monday
morning.
Hi, everyone.
Lyman's with us today. Yay.
Yeah, it's Monday. We don't typically do broadcasts on Monday, but hey, we wanted to change things up a little bit. So, and I actually have with us a stand-in co-host, my sister from another mister, Miss Alena Erickson. Hey, Alena, how are you?
Hey, good to be back. I'm doing
well.
well.
It's been way too freaking long. Man, we got in so much trouble. We need to keep that going. That was fun. That was really fun. Oh gosh, you guys, we got a really good show for you. I have we had a little mix up last Friday, so thank you all for being able to jump back on today. Got our guest. I'm super excited to interview candidate for governor here in Utah, Mr. Phil Lyman. Phil is he's going to fill us in on a very interesting. I don't know what's the word. How do we put this, Phil? Is it like a storyboard, or is it like
yeah, I can explain the syndicate and
there you go.
What's going on here? Yeah.
Do you feel like Neo every now and again, where you're like stuck in and out of the Matrix? And
totally. Yep. Yeah, those things become a lot more real.
Oh gosh, so true. And part of the reason why I wanted Alena to join us today is she has been through some stuff similar that Mr. Lyman has been through. I don't know. I'll let the two come out on who had it worse. But with that being said, I do want to again thank everybody for joining in. I've got a few updates of my own that I want to start off with real quick, and then we will jump into this with Mr. Phil Lyman. So as some of you may know, I told you I have a friend of mine. Actually, Alena knows him. Bryce, you remember Bryce Elina? Yeah. So he was being targeted. There's no other better way to say this. He's being targeted by his local municipality, and I have no qualms about telling you who it is. It's Magna City. And Phil, maybe you've heard stories about the Salt Lake County municipalities. And really what he was targeted for is just something ridiculous and stupid. But essentially what it was is back 3 or 4 years ago, he was a really big advocate for standing up to the tyranny that we were all going through. And so somebody caught wind of this and decided to turn him into the city code inspector because they noticed that he was building a lean-to on the side of his house, right? So he's a garage. a lean-to on the side of his house. Okay. Doesn't infringe on anyone else's rights, doesn't encroach on anyone else's property, doesn't create a substantial harm to the overall general welfare of the public, anything like that. Well, the city came down on him like a ton of freaking bricks. You're violating this ordinance. You're violating this ordinance. You're violating this ordinance. And so he initially tried to comply. And then when they wouldn't comply, he reached out to me and Alena. And I started to do what I could to help him out. And don't want to take too much time, but what ended up happening is he gave them notices that said, listen, I'm well within my constitutionally protected rights to do what I'm doing. You have no authority or jurisdiction to tell me what I can and cannot do with my private property. Leave me alone. Did they leave him alone? Oh, no. They sued him. So they sued him, and the judge in his case is actually an interesting judge because he's made a name for himself. Phil, have you heard of the name Keith Kelly?
I have heard the name.
I guess I should ask the question, how in the world would you know who Judge Keith Kelly is?
Well, he's not a federal judge. He's in the state system.
Yes.
I know the federal judge is a little better in my own cases, but yeah, I've just heard the name Keith Kelly. I don't have background on him, but.
So the reason why you've heard his name is he was in the news. He was the local judge who granted, I don't remember if it was a petition for a restraining order or a preliminary injunction. Basically, he's the judge that said, yeah, if you're a boy and you want to use the girls' bathroom, you're fine. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Right.
So that's this judge, right? So this judge is already one he's an activist judge. He doesn't play by the rules and he doesn't do things according to constitutional principles. So he's the judge assigned to their case. So we go through the whole thing. We're like, hey, listen, these guys they don't have standing in this matter. They haven't proven they have standing. He said he didn't care. Went on with it. They filed a motion for summary judgment. We stated on the record, according to the rules, this is not appropriate. You guys can't do this. He didn't care. Decided to call my buddy a sovereign citizen. Oh, you're just one of those sovereign citizens, and these are all frivolous arguments, and didn't use anything to back it up. So we decided to go on offense. I wrote up for him a petition to vacate or void judgment, and we're seeking damages against the city, against the stupid attorneys that brought this action, and against Judge Keith Kelly. So here's the interesting thing. When he filed this, right, because this is in the 3rd District Court, which is Salt Lake County, same district court that Kelly's in. When he filed this, the clerks took a look at it, and they're like, we don't know what to do with this. No one has ever come in here and sued one of our own judges. We're like, well, we're well within our rights to do it. Judge Kelly acted in the absence of all jurisdiction. When he does that, he's no different than you or me or anyone else and can be held accountable. So we want you to file the case. They didn't file the case for about a week. We have to send this to our legal counsel. So where we are is I'm helping him defend against this frivolous summary judgment where they were saying they want the judge to grant them the right to come onto his property to not only tear down the lean-to, but also tear off his solar panels.
Of course. Yeah.
Of course. Does that make sense to anyone?
He probably didn't get permission.
No.
You can't do stuff without permission.
How dare you do something to your own property without permission from the almighty, powerful government?
Yeah.
It's just disgusting. So anyway, that's where we are with his case. His case was filed. He did serve the other parties. Now we're getting prepared for a motion on his a hearing for his motion on temporary restraining order. So,
and that's the beauty of a regulatory state is it can be used at will by the bureaucracies. They become the judge, jury, and executioner in all things, and it's an agency-driven thing. And you give them enough rule-making authority, enough enforcement authority, and that's the biggest source of corruption that we've ever seen. I mean, it goes right back to the Lord Acton's statement that power corrupts. And absolute power corrupts absolute. It is corrupt to give people that much authority to say you can't do this on your private property. Mm-hmm. We really don't have private property anymore, and it's a shame, and we've allowed it to happen. So it's horrible. It's horrible. and it affects people's lives. I mean, people are in jail, and livelihoods are destroyed over it. And we look at it as political jargon, and it's not. It's destroying the country, destroying our communities. So
Evil, intended evil.
yes.
Well, and this is one of the things I wanted to talk about specifically with you, Phil, is what do we hear about, oftentimes in the news media and everything else, is that how big, how tyrannical the federal government has become. And I'm not going to disagree with that, because they are. They're clearly well outside of their constitutional bounds. We get that. I've had that discussion. Alena and I have talked about that at length. But I would dare say that the more aggressive violator of our God-given protected rights is at the state level, is at the county level, is at the city level, right in your own backyard.
Mm-hmm.
People don't even realize how bad it is in their own backyard. And they're so worried about, well, we got to get this guy elected. We got to do these things to get this guy elected. And I'm like, you're not even looking in your own backyard. If you're not prepared, if you're not paying attention, we're going to go the way of communist China real quick. I mean, gosh, Mao Zedong, he's probably rolling over his grave clapping.
Yeah.
Wow. We never thought we'd get the Americans to do this, but they're doing it on their own and they're happy about it.
Yep.
So,
well, when you have it's that doctrine of the lesser magistrate. I don't know if you've read that book, but a mayor that tells a county commissioner, you don't have authority to do that. No, you can't do that. Or a county commissioner that tells the governor, or anybody all the way up, and they owe that responsibility. That's why it's such a betrayal when you elect people to defend your rights, and instead of defending your rights, they side with the syndicate. And they come after you, and they facilitate the very thing that they promised to fight against. And that sadly, it kind of defines government in a nutshell. You've got everybody pushing for the corruption, and those that are supposed to be fighting it, not only do they not fight it, but they think that they're so much smarter than the patriots who are fighting. It's like, oh, if you knew it was good for you, you would go along with this.
Yeah.
If you were smart, you would comply quickly. You would, and that's the road to communism, and it's absolutely planned and orchestrated by the communists. And when I say that, there is a 21st century version of communism that is rolling out and has been rolling out for a long time, and to deny that, to call it anything but that, really is to diminish what is happening to us.
mm-hmm.
Well, the only ones calling it that are denying it are the communists.
Exactly.
Isn't it hilarious? Those who are actually perpetrating it are the ones who are saying, it's like they're accusing the other side of exactly what they're doing. I mean, that's
which is classic. It's like, so, that's exactly what you would expect. It is a classic response.
Yeah.
But I think it goes even more than that, because I think it's a cultural thing, especially in Utah. Just follow the authorities, just do what your authorities tell you, just do what the leaders tell you. And I'm not for anti-government. I mean, obviously we need government, but government in its proper place, because that's actually supporting what's happening, because they don't want to be confrontational. I mean, that's not nice. That's not kind. That's not being a peacemaker, right?
Yeah.
Fox's term, disagreeing better, than actually these guys get away with what they're doing, because nobody wants to confront. And that's what drives me crazy, that is what is our biggest challenge, is overcoming the culture, because the people understood that they are the head of the government. As the people, we are the head of the government, and we elect people to serve us, not to lead us, not to reign over us. It's a big obstacle to overcome.
I was really kind of waiting before we went there about the whole disagree better thing. I got my little clip of Caillou right here crying, and I just was waiting to play it, but then I realized YouTube would shut us down, so I can't do that as much as I want to. Phil is smiling because he knows what I'm talking about. And I have no qualms about calling him who he is. So I there's a few things that I want to talk about and I want to go over. But first, before I do that, I want to give Phil the floor. Phil, I'd love for you to explain to the people that are listening, not only those of us who live in this beautiful state of Utah, but also those who are around the country that are listening or watching, because it's an interesting political landscape. I don't know what we want to call it. And the way it went down and how it went down and the usurpation of the will of the people probably is the best way to describe that. So would you mind just backing us up? And real quick too, for everyone who's listening, Phil and I actually met in person, and I was really taken aback at his kind-heartedness, how gentle he was. He was just a great guy. I was with Alena at the Utah State Capitol. This is before this show. This is before we've done anything we've done. And I was a nobody then. I'm still a nobody now, but I was a nobody then. And Phil was kind enough to listen to me and my concerns. And so I really do appreciate that. So I just want to tell you that in front of everybody. Thank you. But with that, why don't you fill us in on where you're, I mean, I don't even know where you want to start. You were prosecuted by the Obama administration. I mean, geez,
Yeah.
4 years. You just tell us where you want to start. We'll go from there.
Well, first of all, and it's so good to be on with Alena. I look up to her and have for a very long time. She's a fearless fighter. And on the Capitol, when everyone else was, trying to navigate the compliance of the COVID and the masks and stuff, she was very bold, and I appreciate that. And that's the essence of, to me, what it means to be an American is that you take you take on the opposition at its first appearance, not wait until the very end and see what you can do to salvage it. And so, and Alena's done that. She really is an example to Utah. So thank you, Alena, for that. And
Gosh, Bill, you're times 100,000 times that.
I go back to that session when I walked into and I don't mean to distract. This will weave into what I'm talking about, but after the COVID declaration, we came back to session in 2021, and plexiglass was everywhere. And as a legislator, you had to wear a mask. You could not. And a few of us was like, no, we're not wearing a mask. And we got it from the leadership. We got it from every angle. And you finally say, well, I guess, in order to even participate, we're going to have to wear this mask. And I'm ashamed of that. I go back and I was ashamed of it then. And I told them, I said, this is a really bad look, but I complied to a certain extent. So, anyway, I just remember a specific committee hearing where Alena came. Probably one of the first times I really got to know Alena, and she wasn't having anything to do with that. And I admired it so much. And so, Riley Gaines is coming tomorrow, and the same thing there. She didn't say, I'm going to go home and write a strongly worded letter. She stood right up in the face of the judges and said, I'm not having this. So that's really important. And then to the election and the kind of what I've gone through. And I think there again, Alena's point about our culture in Utah is really interesting. We are people who really defer our judgment to our leaders to a large extent, and have a lot of, pressure to be kind and be nice and to find joy. We just finished General Conference this weekend, and a lot of the messages, and I'm just waiting. I'm just hungry for this, stand up and, stand up for the underdogs and take care of business. And a lot of times it's just, be nice, disagree better, and find joy and stuff like that. It's just, I think everybody's feeling that. And that's that. Okay. So back to my whole story. So I was a county commissioner. The reason I ran for county commission is because the BLM had destroyed 26 families in Blanding by raiding their homes and false charges of artifacts raids. And the media just went crazy with all of this, just this fervor is like a witch hunt. These people are finding artifacts and they're selling them. None of that was the case. There was no black market artifacts ring. It was all done to justify the declaration of a national monument, which they eventually got, which was Bears Ears. Yeah. I ran for county commissioner because I wanted some answers to that. And first question I started asking the Bureau of Land Management was why the raids? What what prompted that, what justified that. You know, I had a good friend who took his life the next morning, Dr. Red, and then the informant, BLM informant, took his life a couple of weeks later, and then another gentleman took his life. So I mean, this was not without casualties, you know. And when the federal government comes down on you, with Dr. Red, they weren't so much coming down on him as they were his wife and his daughter. But he was the target, but they were going after his family, and he felt like taking his life might lessen the attention or the focus on his wife and daughter, which it did. But you know, what a price to pay for a father and a husband to be put in that situation as to how do I battle the federal government? And it wasn't his first rodeo with them. He'd been through it for 8 years prior to that, so he knew what was coming.
Wow.
Ran for county commissioner. It was a constant theme with me against the BLM. You're making bad policy. You're going on long outings with they call themselves the Great Old Broads for Wilderness in Durango. You go out with them for days on end. You get indoctrinated by them. Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance is training your people. The Wilderness Society has the BLM Action Center, which writes your policy. It's like these are our enemies that are running the agency, and they don't like that kind of language. They don't like those kinds of accusations. And so the first opportunity they got to prosecute me, they did, and they prosecuted me for conspiracy to trespass, a misdemeanor charge. No one's ever heard of it before or since, but they charged me with conspiracy to trespass in 2014.
Wait a minute. Doesn't a conspiracy involve 2 or more people?
Yeah. Mine involved at least 1,000 people.
Oh, geez. Okay. This is getting
it's for saying things like as a county commissioner saying that's County Road D5314. It's not closed. You can't prohibit traffic down the road. Now you can limit traffic off the road, but you can't limit traffic on the road. And they were prosecuting people right and left for building roads. They were shutting down roads illegally, and I'm fighting for them. And so my conspiracy to trespass is basically me saying you can't close that road. You don't have the authority to do that, and it's not closed until it's gone through some due process. And so that got me charged with conspiracy to trespass, me and 4 other people. And my attorney at the time said, take no comfort in the fact that you're innocent. This is federal court and it makes no difference. I thought he was being cynical, but I found out very quickly that is not being cynical. It's exactly what it is.
Hold on 1 second. Can you just repeat that again? That you had, and I don't know if you've seen this, and please, if you know people that are within this profession, I hold no ill will towards anyone. I have the very lowest form of thought of the Bar Association and what they teach their members. So will you please say that one more time?
Yeah. So my attorney said, take no comfort in the fact that you're innocent. This is federal court and it makes no difference.
Wow.
And so you get to federal court and the U.S. attorneys prosecuted me based on a petition. They got a petition with like 3,600 signatures of people on the Wasatch Front, almost all from Alliance for a Better Utah, another big environmentalist, left-wing woke, group. And one of the comments from the U.S. attorneys was, well, we got a petition with 3,600 signatures. What were we supposed to do? It's like, oh, I guess you're supposed to prosecute if you get a petition from a bunch of people. So if you could organize and get, a couple of thousand people to sign out a petition to prosecute anybody for anything, I guess you go and do it. So that's justice.
Well, I don't know. I don't want to cut you off, but I don't know that that's true because Alena and I spent a lot of time putting names and pens to paper to bring to light crimes that were committed by our quote unquote supposed leaders. I mean, how many names and people did we have, Alena? More than that, didn't you?
Oh, for me and my project?
Yeah.
Amount of names, but I know the documentation. I have about over 600 pages of affidavits.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know. This is a double standard. This is a 2-tiered system of justice. So
maybe I should
would
clarify.
be curious to know if those names and those people were actually real. But anyway, I digress. Sorry, Phil. Back to you.
Yeah, maybe I should clarify because I think it's if there's anything, a petition against anything that's virtuous leveler of good report, they'll definitely prosecute that.
Yeah.
That makes a little more sense.
Yeah. If there's something, it's like right now in this country, it's like you don't go to jail for telling a lie. You go to jail for telling the truth. And that's kind of you learn this the hard way going through federal court. And that is federal court, kind of in a nutshell. And the U.S. attorneys, they really do have a license to lie. They can stand up there, they can fabricate stuff, they can call everybody liars. But man, as a defendant, you better tell the truth across the board. And we did. And we even brought the phone call with the BLM saying, that we have full permission to do the ride and recapture canyon, which is about a mile from my front door in Blanding. People think it's a remote canyon. But the judge threw that out immediately, kind of getting sidetracked on this whole thing. But that was the court case. Ended up, after I was convicted of misdemeanor conspiracy to trespass, then I found out that the judge was best friends with the head legal counsel for Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance, and his this Stephen Block. And Stephen Block's wife was recently appointed as a judge by Gary Herbert, right about that same time that this was happening, and that was Kara Pettit, who was also a former partner in the firm with Judge Shelby, who was my judge. And so I said, I'm filing a motion to recuse. And my attorney said, you can't do that. If you do, you will lose. And instead of going to jail for 2 years, you'll go to jail for 5 years. And I said, well, they have to recuse. And I don't care what
that's a conflict of interest.
Yeah, you have to recuse. So we filed, and it was funny because I was down in Florida visiting my son when I got a call from my attorney saying, okay, I will file the motion to recuse, but I'm also filing with it my resignation as your attorney. And I said, oh, win-win, get it done. Because you can't really fire your attorney, but he can resign. So it's like, okay, yeah, file it and resign, and we'll be done with, we'll go on, I'll get another attorney. So we filed the motion, full confidence that it was going to fall on its face and I was going to jail. And 2 days later, Judge Shelby recused. And then another judge recused, and then another judge recused. And then the last judge sent an email to my legal counsel saying, I'll take the case, but only if Phil Lyman promises not to ask me to recuse. And I responded,
Judge.
I responded, you have as much obligation not to recuse if you don't have a conflict as you do to recuse. And it's not my call. I'm not the one that's deciding that a judge has to recuse. I file the motion. They can do whatever they feel is the right thing to do. So 3 judges felt it was the right thing to recuse. And that was my response. So she recused as well. I ended up with the chief judge. Long story short, you go through the restitution hearing, which was brutal. Mm-hmm. And I should have gotten a new hearing when the judge recused. The restitution, he fined me $90,000. And he said, granted, there were no damages, but it would have been irresponsible for the BLM not to have done this study that they spent $90,000 on to study if there were damages. This is a road. I mean, this is a county road. There's no damages, but so I thought, well, I'm definitely going away for 2 years. And this was 3 months later when you come back for sentencing, and pretty traumatic time. I figured I was going away for a long time. I'd moved all my, property around into my wife's name, done whatever we could, organized our life for me to be gone, set up my business, my CPA firm. I'm self-employed. So I set that up to function. I thought they might haul me off in chains. But when I got to court for sentencing, the first words out of the judge were, Mr. Lyman, I haven't slept much the last 2 weeks. I've been reading your case. And I wanted to say, and this is the first time the judge had ever actually looked at me or addressed me. And I wanted to say, well, you should have read the case 6 months ago when you denied a trial. But he was not happy. He was not happy with the prosecution, and he reprimanded them, and he sentenced me to 10 days. And the other person who was convicted with me, a friend of mine, sentenced him to 5 days, and said you can keep your guns and you can check in whenever it's convenient and all this stuff. So it became very much a token jail term at that time, at that point. But I did the 10 days. It was a very real 10 days. in the Purgatory Correctional Facility. And
By the way, most people don't realize that's the jail that's in southern Utah.
yeah,
It's just called Purgatory.
yeah.
My brother-in-law works for the Utah Highway Patrol, and he used to take people to Purgatory. He would say, he would always joke, he's like, yeah, I'm 10-4 to Purgatory. And people are like, what? So just so everyone who's listening, who's not from Utah knows, that's the Southern Utah Correctional Facility.
If it had been over 30 days, then I would have had to gone to a full-blown federal prison. But Purgatory is a qualified holding for federal prisoners, which is interesting. So I'm in there for conspiracy to trespass, misdemeanor. And when I walk into the cell block, and I'm in maximum security, so I go into a lockdown cell with the cellmate, and nice young guy in there for some drug issues that he was facing. And he said, so are you state or are you county? And I said, I'm federal. And he yelled out the little window, he's federal. And it echoed down, and people were like, he's federal, he's federal. I had like instant credibility. I was like the toughest guy in the block. And I didn't have the heart to tell him it was just a misdemeanor trespass. But anyway, went through that. Got out of jail, long ordeal, a year and a half of trial, $400,000 in legal expenses and things that I paid. And Mike Noel, who was in the legislature, called me one day and said he wasn't running again. And so I thought long and hard about it and decided I was going to run for the legislature, and I won that. I think I'm the only legislator in the history of the state of Utah that was elected while he had a probation officer. I still had to call and get permission to even go across my district because I had to go down into Arizona. And that went on for about a year. And then and then they dropped the probation early. And, but the U.S. Attorney's Office was still harassing me, coming after me, just on everything that they could do. You could just feel. And I told Jody one day, my wife, I said, this is never going to stop. This is just, they're going to crack me open. And, and I'd seen them do it. I'd seen them do it to other people. And it's,
yeah, Bundy at the top of the list, right?
Yeah. They get a bee in their bonnet, to use a really old term. Mm-hmm. But they go after people, and it becomes a vindictive thing. And the U.S. attorney that was coming after me, she was all over Facebook wearing her Protect the Bears Ears shirt and wearing her little pink hat with the ears on it at the Women's March. And she hates Mike Lee and she hates Donald Trump. And it's like, I should not have to have this attorney over my case. There should be somebody else. And
let's be clear, it shouldn't be a case at all.
Right. The whole thing. It was political prosecution. This
was absolutely political prosecution.
Can I ask a quick question before I forget? Because I do that. The Chevron deference being overturned, does that make a difference for you now? Because it was my understanding that these 3-letter agencies hold no merit, so you can actually turn around and sue them for damages now. Is that correct?
It does open up the lawsuit. They still have immunity. They still have to waive immunity, but the Chevron deference really takes away a huge toehold that they had, especially just like you say, with the 3-letter agencies. Okay. So it's huge. I think that's huge. It's going to take a long time for it to kind of work its way through the court system. But yeah.
Well, I would ask one question about the whole immunity. So, bringing up my friend's case again, we are actually going after, I told you we're going after the judge because he acted without any jurisdiction, and the judge is not afforded any judicial immunity when they act outside of jurisdiction. Neither is prosecution. Prosecutors are not afforded prosecutorial immunity when they act outside of the scope and their authority that constitutes all of this. So a couple of questions that came to mind, and I don't want to derail this, but these are the things that I have been hounding on for the last, how long we've been doing this show now, Justice? A year and a half, whatever.
Yeah, almost 2 years.
And I've been hounding on people's, like, if you don't know your rights, you have no rights. So a couple questions I wanted to ask you. You mentioned to me that this was a misdemeanor charge, but it came with jail time. Supreme Court precedent has stated that any charge that comes with jail time falls within the infamous crime under the 6th Amendment. So my question to you was, was there an indictment, number one? And number two, was there credible witnesses presented at your trial or in an affidavit form or in a deposition or anything of that nature?
I don't know if there was an indictment. There probably was. They had what they said. They had a grand jury.
Okay.
That approved it.
So a grand jury can do two things. They can approve an indictment, or they can prove a bill of particulars. That's it. Or they can come back with a no bill. They can say there's not enough here to do anything.
Yeah, I suspect it was an indictment, and we had a trial,
Okay.
and it was a joke, but it was a trial.
I guess again. So if it was the United States, right? The United States versus Phil Lyman, who is claiming they have standing on behalf of the United States to come and prosecute you? Because the prosecutor can't do it. Under no set of circumstances can any prosecutor come in front of a court and testify to the matters of the case unless they have personal knowledge of the case and unless they are under oath. And they never do. And I'm willing to bet, and you're probably going, oh my gosh, that your attorney didn't do anything to stand up to it, because again, they're all part of a big boy, good old boys club. This is just how we do it.
Yeah, I think it was. I think
that motion.
I think it was the Bureau of Land Management that was the injured party or whatever. You know, might have been the state director. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. The whole thing was a complete farce. It was just a complete farce. And my own attorney, I'd hired this firm, and they put an attorney on the case, and after the whole thing was over, his closing argument was just, I was just like dumbfounded, like, that's not a closing argument. It was like, I don't know. It was just weird. And I called the head partner in the firm afterwards, and I said, what was up with that closing argument? You guys didn't even put up a defense. And he said, well, we just assumed that you were guilty of what they said you did. And I said, how much money does it take for you to actually look at the case? And he said, I hate to be the one to advise this, but you could, on pretty good grounds, sue for a new trial based on incompetence of legal counsel. And it's like, oh yeah, I probably could. So, I mean, basically saying we didn't know what we're doing. We've never been in this situation before. And, for what it's worth, you go through that, and it's that's an old friend of mine used to say, I'd say, governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. And he says, yeah, well, it's either the consent of the governed or the authority of an 800-pound gorilla. Both have a lot of authority. So you get a room full of egomaniacs with guns and guards at their disposal and jail facilities waiting for you, and you can be as right as can be and still sit in a jail or get executed or all of these things. And that's and it's not rare. It is not rare to see innocent people just get completely, ambushed by really corrupt U.S. attorneys.
Sorry, I just want to jump in real quick. I have an individual I look up to. I believe he passed away. His name is Richard Cornforth. I don't know if you've ever heard that name. From Oklahoma. And he put together back in the early 80s some videos, and then he has a document that I've taken a lot of the stuff that I know of called The Secrets of the Legal Industry. And he said back in the 80s, he said, if I had to put a guess, I would guess upwards of 70% of the people that have been convicted and are sitting in jails are sitting in jails due to void convictions, void judgments, because we live in a common law system. This is a common law form of government that our founding fathers gave us. But what has happened is now we're living in an administrative state. Roman civil law is what you'll hear a lot, right? And what Roman civil law is, for people who don't understand that, basically what it is it's democracy. And that's it. Zero. It's not a republic. It's democracy. It's people who sit in a legislative forum, pass laws. Then you have the supreme commander signs it into law, and that is the law. Whether it violates your God-given right or not, it is the law. That is Roman civil law. And that's all that these bar attorneys know. And again, like I said, there are good men and women who are attorneys and who are trying to fight the system. But as long as they carry a bar card, they're part of the problem. Because the American Bar Association is what has caused this problem.
Yeah.
It's money.
Yeah, you saw that in Ammon Bundy's case where the judge forbade mention of the Constitution in his courtroom.
Yeah. Does that make sense to anyone? Where in the world does that judge get off? You have zero authority except given to us by we the people through the Constitution for the state of Utah and the Constitution for the United States. And you come in and you're saying, don't bring that Constitution garbage into my courtroom?
And I think he was telling us what the context of that trial was, which was not a constitutional court. This was an admiralty court. It was the bar. It was, it's like, this has nothing to do with America. This has nothing to do with the Constitution. Yep. This is it is Rome. It is Rome.
This is one of the things too, I never really gave a lot of heed to the Declaration of Independence. I knew what the document was. I knew it's what we signed. Well, we didn't sign, what the founding fathers signed to abdicate from England and to start this great nation. But I never really paid attention to all of the grievances that were listed.
Right.
And as I read through these, we've done this before on the show. As I read through these, I'm going, oh my gosh, this is what the king was doing to the colonials. This is what our so-called government is doing to us today. You just pick one. Pick one. You can replace the word he with it or they or whoever you want. He has refused his assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. That's the one that I thought was interesting. There's another one that's right down here that I actually quoted in my friend's lawsuit. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. Mm-hmm. Phil, that's exactly what happened to you.
Well, and I want to bring up something too. When we talk about these bureaucracies, how much power they hold, I question, because the Supreme Court has already acknowledged that Utah, we need to be able to get our land back.
Yep.
And so start considering the 9th and 10th Amendment. How much validity did your case really have? These were just big boys trying to hold their big guns and act tough, right? Somebody's got to win this argument. And by hell or high water, it wasn't going to be you. Mm-hmm. This argument. But I think principally based, the 9th and 10th Amendments absolutely should always support that the power is in the people. I mean, first of all, when you have a crime, you have to show injury.
There has to be an injured party.
Right. You didn't injure anything. And then if we go back even further, who created the federal government? It was the states. The states created the federal government, and the people created the states that created the federal government.
Yeah.
So you as a human being, as a man, why can you not walk on this land to begin with? Where was the crime? But we can't talk about it in that language. We need to. Mm-hmm. They don't speak that language because, again, you go back to the good old boy club that's got to remain there. They got to contain their power and their authority over the people. And I think the one thing, yeah, you're right. It's that 800-pound gorilla with guns and gels and everything else. But if the people were truly informed, would you have had a case? Because the people hold the power. It's that power to push back and say, no, we don't want Phil to be prosecuted.
Yeah.
Get him out of jail right now, drop the charges. But where were those people?
Along those lines, Alena, Article 1, Section 2, the Utah Constitution, all political power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority for their equal protection and benefit, and they have the right to alter or reform their government as the public welfare may require.
And that's the whole power is really in the people.
Yeah.
But people acknowledge that. I mean, the thing that drove me most, that disturbed me most about my campaign.
Yeah.
I don't know if you feel this, Phil, but you feel the swelling of this support, right? Like people gather around you and they want you to get in. And, I was more than prepared to just go in and shake things up because they needed to be.
Yes.
I probably would have been the worst legislator because I just wanted to repeal a bunch of stuff.
No, that's the best legislator.
Mhm.
I wanted to be a voice, right? And to me, that would be much better than Cutler, right? Like much better than what Cutler's doing. And he's in a little pocket of Cox. But you know, and the hard part is Cutler is such a nice guy. And that's why that just doesn't resonate with me, because the culture, the more they side with, oh, let's just be nice, let's just be non-confrontational. Well, what were the founding fathers? They were confrontational. Who was Moses? He was confrontational. Who was Christ himself?
He was confrontational.
Confrontational. So if we're commanded to be like Christ as Christians,
Yeah.
it's our duty, it is our responsibility. And I don't see things changing until people have courage. Well, maybe they're afraid, but courage grows with practice.
Look,
Get up courageous.
Absolutely.
look what you did, Alena. Look what you did. I'm sitting here today because of you. Phil, you can laugh all you want, but I'm sitting here today because I came across a Facebook post that you posted that said, "What are we doing, people?" And my wife and I looked at each other when all of this stuff was going down, and we're like, "Are they serious? They can't really think this works. Are they serious?" And we took it, legit for maybe about 2 weeks. Well, maybe they know something that we don't. Okay, well, and then I'm just like, no, this doesn't make sense. And I wanted to do something, but I didn't know what I could do. And it wasn't until I saw the video on Facebook that Alena had posted that was there for maybe a day before they took it down, however long that was. And then I reached out, and then we just started on this. This is the journey we've been on. I mean, I've been fortunate. I traveled quite a bit at the time, and I had some good friends that I came across in Ohio, my Ohio freedom fighters, and they invited me to speak at some of their events. And they had a hall full of 400 or 500 people that were just sick and tired of the tyranny. So to your point, Phil, and to your point, Alena, I had some advice once that was given to me from a guy I used to work with back when I did real estate. And he told me something that stuck with me, and it had nothing to do with real estate whatsoever. He said, listen, anytime attorneys get involved, the only people who win are the attorneys. I'm like, yeah, he's absolutely true. Because again, right, you said you spent over $400,000 in legal fees, and what did you come out with? A conviction and 10 days in jail. Now there is good news to the story, and I want Phil to tell that because it's fascinating. I
have to add though, in closing, in the comments, as soon as my campaign was over, the message that I always had in any cottage meeting, anything that I ever had was, I am nothing without the backup of the people. It is the weight of the people. And since then, in gospel doctrine, when we talk about Moroni, I have brought up some stirring emotions, right, in people, because the people that talk politics, it's like anti-religious to talk politics. I'm like, what do we do? And the whole Book of Mormon is full of politics. The whole Bible is full of politics.
Bible is full of it.
Right. It's full of it. And it's our responsibility to be that voice. I said, I told my ward, I said, do you know who's afraid at the Capitol? The legislators, they're afraid of the people. Mm-hmm. And in our conservative state, who showed up when they wanted to take the Bible out of the schools? 2 Baptist pastors. Where was the LDS Church? The dominant faith. We didn't want to get political.
There was nobody there to be found.
Right. And so my message in my campaign was always, this isn't about me. I'm not a political savior. And it was the same message in gospel doctrine. You can elect people to be in positions, but that doesn't retire you from your responsibility as a person, as a member of the community, that you elect somebody so you can sleep better at night. Because when my campaign was over, everything fell underneath. People were gone. Yeah. The people, It was so disappointing. And I had a thank you dinner for those that helped with my campaign. And I said, I know you guys are feeling discouraged, but Cutler has some dangerous ideas, and he's in the pocket of some dangerous people. We have our work cut out for us. Just because I'm not in there doesn't mean that you do not have a responsibility. Yeah. And so we've got to overcome the culture. That's the biggest challenge that we have. So anyway, wanted to share that.
No, that's a great point, and you're absolutely right. I mean, we as number one, we're Americans. And those of us that are Christians are Christians. We have to stand up for what Christ himself said. Woe unto you lawyers. Woe unto you people who don't listen. I mean, it's the reason why we're in the mess we're in today is because our ancestors 125 years ago just decided to sit back and let people who they thought was better do things for them. And we've just been on this roller coaster ride ever since. And it's taken this long for the people to wake up. It's taken this long. Phil, we're getting close to an hour. I don't know what your time schedule is. We want to be very respectful of your time. We do have a couple of questions.
I've got time. I don't know how long you can go, but I've got
okay.
time.
Listen,
We can go.
Justice knows I'll talk all flipping day. So I am good as long as you've got the time.
Yeah.
I do want to just point out two quick things that we're talking about, right? It's Alena said this where the legislature fears we the people. And I saw Phil shaking his head because Phil's been part of the Utah legislature for how many years, Phil?
6 years.
6 years?
Still am.
Okay.
6 years, yeah.
6 years. He's part of the Utah state legislature, and he is one of those voices in the legislature of, hey, you morons, we don't have the authority to do this. And they just keep doing it anyway. So there's that. The other thing where we are feared, and I'm seeing this, is when we, the people, go in front of a tribunal and assert our rights as we, the people. Not when we hand stuff off to an attorney. Not when we go hire a lawyer, or as I affectionately call them, a liar, capital L-I-E, lowercase y-e-r. Okay? When we do that, we're no better. We're part of the system. And I can tell you firsthand because I'm in the middle of a number of active cases. You guys know that's one of my hobbies. It's a weird hobby to have, but I do enjoy it. And I've got a case right now that's sitting up here in district court. And I got this attorney who filed this motion to dismiss, claiming this, and this. And I'm reading this and I'm going, I see no testimony from anybody who has any personal knowledge whatsoever. This entire document is frivolous. So what do? I object, and I object loudly. And since we weren't in a hearing setting, I objected on paper. And I just wrote, I said, this entire document is garbage. There's not one support. There's nothing in support from anyone who has any personal knowledge whatsoever. Nothing that this attorney say can be heard by this court. It's hearsay. So the judge scheduled a hearing for a week before Christmas, by the way, which I thought was interesting. So what's going to happen at this hearing? I'm going to show up. The stupid attorney is going to show up. Do you think he's going to have anybody with personal knowledge at that hearing? No. So what am I going to do? The minute he opens his mouth, objection, hearsay, objection, hearsay, objection. I'm going to keep saying it until my face gets blue because the attorneys can say nothing. They can't unless they're under oath. And I'll say, hey, are you willing to go under oath? You willing to swear under penalty of perjury? And I defy you to find an attorney that will. Right, Phil? Would your attorney do that in your trial? Would he go under oath?
No.
I'm not going to do that. I don't want to put my skin in the game. So the point I'm trying to make is this is where we are feared. We are feared when we stand up and we object. You're way outside of you're not even playing basketball on the basketball court. We're playing basketball, but you're standing over on the football field thinking you're playing basketball. That's not how this works. Okay? There are rules on how this works, and you're standing way over there thinking that you're playing the game legitimately, and you're not. You got to call them out on it. So I want to get to the good news. Well, they're the part of the good news, and then get to the other stuff. So Phil, take us back when you were convicted. You had 10 days. You got out of jail. How long after that was it before Trump caught wind of your case?
Yeah, so that it was a couple of years later, and it was after the 2020 election, and I had reached out to some people to see if I could get a pardon, and the word that I got back was you can't get pardoned for a misdemeanor. But after the election, I was sitting there one night, and I was wrestling with this whole thing with the U.S. Attorney's Office. They had the $90,000 restitution. I wrote a check for that, paid it off, and trying just to extricate myself from their nastiness. And I was sitting there, and I was kind of at a low point, honestly. And I thought, you know what? Trump can pardon anybody for anything. I don't believe them, the people that told me that. So I pulled down the application. I filled out the application for a pardon, and part of it was I had to get an affidavit from 3 character witnesses. And one of them, and so I texted Mike Lee, Senator Lee, and asked if he would be a character witness. And his response was so gratifying. it was about midnight, so I figured it'd be a few days, but it was immediate. And he started texting, absolutely 100%. You're on the side of the angels. I won't sleep until we get this done. And he really did go to bat. The pardon board denied the pardon. He pulled it out and ran it up the chain. And then when the pardons came out, the first 17, I was among that first 17 that were pardoned by Donald Trump. And it was largely symbolic, like I say, that all of it's behind me. And in fact, even some of it, like Monty Wells, my good friend who was prosecuted at the same time, he said, I'm not putting in a pardon application. I didn't do anything wrong. And I totally agree with him. So he refused to do the pardon, to his credit. I did the pardon, and I got the pardon, which also, the U.S. Attorney's Office really they went away after that. Knock on wood. I hope they're not listening, but so I got that pardon. And I will say, the huge, sunrise at the end of all of this is the understanding and the knowledge of what it is that you're dealing with. Christ said, you'll have the truth and the truth will set you free. He didn't tell you all the things it would do to you before you were free, like take away your job and your livelihood and your friends and your money and your worldly things. And you wake up one day and you say, you know what, I am free. And I think it's what a lot of us feel when we get into the fighting the good fight on this is it's not a fun fight because there's no opposition. It's a fun fight because there is such opposition. You can see exactly where it's coming from. And when you can step back and kind of really see the field, you can actually see what's going on and what's at stake and who the players are. And to me, it just gives me such a tremendous sense of obligation. I'm on the backside of my career and family and things like that. So I don't have, I've got nothing to lose and everything to fight for. All of my kids, my grandkids, my community, and I'm in a position I don't want to say this at all like pridefully, but I have no interest in deceiving anybody ever. There's no gaslighting that's going on. And that's really been the highlight of our campaign for governor. And people can feel it. They can tell.
Yes.
They are not lying to us. They're telling us the truth. And if I don't know everything, it doesn't stop me from at least coming out and saying, I don't know exactly what's going on in these elections, but everything tells me that Spencer Cox doesn't have his signatures. And then the fact that they won't produce, and whether it's the signatures or the election results or this is what they're doing to the, Utah is doing this to our water. They're centralizing control, and it's going to be really bad for us. None of that is a campaign platform. It's all of those things happening that brought me to the point of running for governor to say, somebody, wake up. We've got to, not somebody, everybody wake up. We gotta recognize what's going on, because we're going to wake up. And that's what I said after the 2024 session. I said, I guarantee 10 years from now, we're going to look back on this session and people are going to say, what did we do with our water that gave away all of our water rights? Because we did.
Let's start real quick too for those who are listening. We're getting some folks in the chat here talking about some other very good candidates. John Gentry looks like in Tennessee. Looks like Focus and Diesel for We the People have mentioned. Focus, if you have a line, I'd love to talk with John. This is an open platform. We want to talk with anyone. So I want to back up a little bit and talk about the governor's race here in Utah. And two, the reason why, again, I told you my first interaction with Phil. He shook my hand. He didn't know me from Adam, listened to my concerns, and he agreed with me. And for those who are watching or listening, Phil's from Blanding, Utah, which is a little, how many people live in Blanding, Phil?
About 4,000. Yeah,
it's a very small town in southeastern Utah. It's really out in the middle of nowhere. But hey, you do have Lake Powell, which is close by, so there's that.
It's the biggest town in San Juan County. Come on.
So, but yeah, I was going to say my high school had more people than Blanding does.
You know what?
But Utah does things a little differently in how they elect people to office, especially the state office, like governor, AG, other things like that. So we have a caucus. We have a state caucus program, and the candidates go to caucus. And really, I'm of the opinion that the caucus program is one of the best ways of vetting potential candidates, because you get everybody on the floor, and you're doing what politicians what they used to do, is you're walking around talking to people, trying to get support, garnering support. So here on the Republican side, there were two main candidates. There was the incumbent by proxy, really, if you want to call him that, and then there's Phil. So can you just tell everybody what the results of that caucus was, and then also the results of that and what was supposed to happen as a result?
Yeah. Great. The caucus system is amazing. And you get the state, so you get your county delegates, they are elected state delegates. They come up to the state convention, and we won the state convention with 67.54%. So 68% of the convention vote. Anything over 60%, the bylaws say you go straight to the general election. There is no primary.
Okay. And for contrast, what was the percentage that the incumbent, I don't even want to say his name.
Yeah, 32%.
Okay, so 32% in the Republican caucus said, yeah, we're going to keep you, guy, but almost 68% no, it's time for a change. All right.
Right. It's the first time in the history of the caucus that the governor failed to qualify, that the incumbent failed to qualify for the primary. So you have to get above 40%. And if two people are above 40%, then they move on to a primary election. So it's the first time that we've really challenged the idea with the governor that you don't qualify. You're not going to the primary. He says, oh no, but I got the signatures. I got the 28,000 signatures.
Let's talk about that real quick, because I want people to understand wait a minute. You just said that according to the bylaws of the caucus that you get over 60%, you're automatically on the general election ballot.
Right.
But I'm looking at the general election ballot right now on the screen. I've got it shared. Unfortunately, I don't see Phil Lyman's name on here. What do I see?
Yeah.
I see this idiot and this other idiot right underneath him.
Mm-hmm.
So how is that possible, Phil? What happened?
So they come back and they say, well, because of SB 54, the bill passed 10 years ago, you can have an alternate path to the primary ballot by getting signatures.
Okay.
And for the governor, it's 28,000 signatures. And that puts you on to a primary election. It doesn't put me onto a primary election. I earned my spot on the general, but for some reason, and again, this is kind of untested because there was never a governor who didn't force a primary or win outright. So now we've got a governor who didn't even qualify for a primary. I qualified to bypass the primary, but somehow because of a state law that the governor can get on a primary, then I've got to go on the primary too. And basically, and we know that that's how it works. You pay the money for signatures, then you blow out a bunch of money in advance of the primary. You get all the low information voters to come out and vote. You get all the Republicans that switch parties and vote, which was probably about the 30% that he got at the delegates at the convention. Anyway, so we had a primary. He won the primary, 54 to 46. Our poll numbers showed that it was going to be those exact numbers, but in the opposite direction. I think his poll numbers showed the same thing, and I think they cheated. I think they front loaded 40,000 votes into the system.
Wait a second. We have the most verifiable voting history in the record of voting history. You can't say allegations like that, sir.
Right.
Well,
And the beautiful thing is I'd love to be proven wrong. So.
Go ahead, Alena.
Bill, you've got some experience with elections.
Yes, I do.
You've uncovered a lot of dancing, right? So, I mean, even when I ran, I was like,
Oh,
We lost her. She's coming. There she is.
yeah, okay. Even when I ran, I was like, think we have elections, but it was crazy. And just not to take the time from you, but even in a smaller race, if we're talking about now, we need a lot of money because now it's not about the people, it's about senators, and you got to pay for those. I mean, in my House race, I earned almost $30,000, and most of it for donations, total grassroots, which is a lot for a House race. And Cutler was panicking. They were panicking, and they sent out a poll, asking people, who are you going to vote for, Alena or Paul? And the day after they sent that out, Hawks, who was the sitting legislator that was retiring from the seat, sent out a dangerous email about me. And it was constituents on his email list. And basically he copied and pasted the Salt Lake Tribune article that even 2 years later, they were still tagging my name and everything they could with this lie about me and who I affiliate with and how dangerous I am as a domestic terrorist. And so Hawks told people not to vote for me. But I had more money in my account, and Ron Paul endorsed me. They made about 10,000 phone calls, 20-1 in favor of me. My grassroots, we hit about 5,000 doors, 20-1 in favor of me. We spent that $30,000. We had overpass banners. We had, freeway banners. We had a mobile billboard. We had 5 mailers that went out. I really went and talked to the people, and I will say that I think I'm okay. This is the hardest thing in the world for me to say as a candidate that didn't get in, but I'm okay that I didn't get in. I was asked to run. There are people who want to run and want to be in that, and that's their thing. And then there are those of us who are willing to run. But I will say that I just don't see it. I mean, in my cottage meetings, I had full cottage meetings, and my campaign manager was paying these kids some money to go see who was showing up at Cutler's. Nobody.
Yeah.
Cutler was sitting there by himself. And so Mitt Romney actually came in when they started seeing the amount of donations that I was getting. Mitt Romney came in and donated to Cutler's campaign, along with every woke left liberalist organization. Mm-hmm. And so to me, I just look at this because Cox, when he became governor on a 30%.
Yep.
He's never been popular. He
never has been popular, ever.
Right. I mean, the one thing we have to overcome again is culture, because people just want something nice. And one thing that Cox does really well is the sophistry. He's super good at it. He knows how to appeal subconsciously to the culture here and appeal as like a bishop, or to those who don't know, a pastor. He knows how to just kind of lean in, just look like that fireside bishop, Yeah. He gets people that way, I think. And because his talk disagree better. That was actually the one thing when I was in my campaign and going door to door, that was the most common thing people said, is they just wanted the fighting to stop. Yeah. And so I left his tapped into that image. Anyways, tangent, but
no, that's not a tangent. And I just want to add to that. I don't think I agree at all with this whole disagree better thing. Wasn't it Cox? And yes, it was, who put out a meme where he said, just wear the damn face diaper. Wasn't that him? Yes, I do remember that was him. Is that us disagreeing better? No, it's not. And guys, the reason, again, I don't want to just sit here and feel like I'm on my high horse for Phil, but when our founders founded this nation, they never in a million years ever thought that the people who sought political office would do so for gain. They always felt like this was a service, which is why they never put term limits on things, which is why they didn't do these certain things that people are asking for today. They never thought people would want these things. President Washington, George Washington, he didn't want to be president. People wanted to make him a king. He didn't want that. He's like, I don't want this. I don't want to do this. We just threw off a tyrant. I don't want to do this, but I will do it because you're asking me to. Well, and that's the impression I get from Phil. Phil is running for governor, not because he wants to, or not because he wants the high office or the power of governor. He's doing it because he has a love for country and for family and for faith, and he's sick and tired of seeing what these bureaucrats and these politicians have done to our state.
One thing that we need to acknowledge about Phil is, Phil, you've had an incredible amount of courage, because you're always voting on the right way, even when you're voting alone. And even though you receive a lot of pressure, and I think that club can be ostracizing, you still stand on principle. And I really commend you for that.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
So to get back to Phil's story, he won caucus. He should have gone straight to the general ballot. This is the general ballot we have here on the screen for any of you who are watching. You can see his name is not here, and that's because this dork got signatures, allegedly. There's a story behind that one to get to in a second. And he was able to put himself on the primary ballot. So, well, let's talk about the primary. Hey, Phil, who can vote in Utah's primary for a particular political office?
If it's the Republican primary, then you have to be a registered Republican to vote in that Republican primary.
Okay, but how soon do you have to register? Can you register the same day and vote?
Excuse me. You can if you're not already a member of another registered political party. So, yeah.
So if I was a member of another political party, say yesterday, and I termed that, and then I can sign up for this one today. Okay, makes sense. That's legit. Total legit.
Right.
That's above board.
Yeah, the primary was, by all the statistics, and anybody would tell you that roughly 30% of the Republicans voting in the Republican primary are Democrats. They just switched parties.
Yeah.
So that's a 30%.
And they do it just for the primary.
Right.
As soon as the primary is over, they switch right back. And this is the vicious cycle that we see. So what we have here is essentially we have the corruptor in chief, Mr. Spencer J. Cox himself, and his assistant, Deidre Henderson. She's just as bad, if not worse. Where they have, and I don't have any evidence of this. I don't have to have evidence. I only have to allege it. But I'm alleging there was fraud involved in getting their name on this list, because we talked about the signatures, right? Phil brought up SB 54, Senate Bill 54, which is now a Utah law. I don't remember where it is, and I don't really care because I don't follow that kind of stuff. But basically what it is if you do not come out of caucus, you can get your name on the primary by gathering 28,000 signatures. So how did they gather 28,000 signatures? Did they get their team of people to go door to door? No. They hired a firm to do it. This firm is based out of St. George, Southern Utah?
No, I think it's Wasatch Front based.
Based out of the Wasatch Front, okay. But there was what's interesting about this firm, and you may have to correct me on this, Phil. Aren't they under an active criminal investigation from Washington County?
There is a criminal investigation going on that involves Gather Inc. But I don't know. Nobody will tell us if it's against Gather, if it's against one of their contractors. Nobody knows. All we know is we may not look at any of the data because it's under criminal investigation. So very convenient.
So you have asked for the court to say, hey, or not the court, excuse me. You have asked for the, okay, and here's the other problem, guys. Utah is such a bass-backward state. We do not have a Secretary of State. We're one of the few states that don't. By the way, I have been reading the Utah original Constitution. Did you know that we had a Secretary of State, Phil?
Oh, yeah.
We had a Secretary of State. Somebody decided to get rid of that. I don't know who that was.
Yeah, until 1978, I think.
Yeah, for whatever reason that was, we'll never know. So under that, since we don't have a Secretary of State, which would normally be the office that would handle elections, that now falls under the Lieutenant Governor's office. So does anybody see a conflict of interest at all where the Lieutenant Governor, Deidre Henderson, is running the elections for their own re-election campaign?
Well, let me put a little bit more color on this whole thing. You've got the governor's campaign manager is also one of the principals of Election Hive, which runs a huge lobbying effort in the state. So you got the biggest lobbying firm running campaigns, lobbying legislators, lobbying the governor. And And then you find out the same individual is a principal in the signature gathering company. So he's gathering the signatures, he's running the campaign, he's raising the money, he's doing all these things, he's setting the policy. He's got all this inside track, and I can just tell that there's this feeling of, look, you take care of me, I'll take care of you. So he starts a nonprofit for housing, gets a couple $1 million from the legislature for his housing nonprofit. I mean, if you could get more like incestuous, I'd like to know how in this particular situation. And then, as you pointed out, who's in charge of the watchdog of all of this operation? It's the lieutenant governor, who is on the same ticket with the governor. Lieutenant governors don't run independently. No. So it's the governor is in charge of all of this himself. So when we say, we don't think you got the signatures, we would like to verify those signatures. If I had the signatures, if I were the governor, I would say, knock yourself out, spend 3 weeks on it. I don't care. 28,000 signatures. It's your time. It's your loss of your weekends or whatever.
Right.
But instead of that, it's like, how dare you ask for these signatures? These have signatures of women who are under protective order and their husbands are trying to find them so that they can destroy their lives. And it's like, oh, well, maybe they should have thought about that then before they signed a public petition. And then they take the voter roll laws for privacy and conflate that and say, oh, that applies to these petitions. Well, it certainly didn't apply to the petitions when they were gathering signatures for the flag. Those were open wide up. Didn't matter if you were on the private list or the withheld list on the voter roll. You signed the petition. It's a public petition. Same thing on these nominating petitions. So they've just tortured the code and the rules and the law. You get people like Todd Weiler in there just spinning and turning and twisting all this stuff. I am an attorney. I'm a senator. I know all these things, and just lying through their teeth on this stuff. And it makes me so angry. But that's what you get. So you get, and who do you go to remedy this? You go to the lieutenant governor's office. She says no. So then you go to the state records committee, all appointed by Cox. They say no. So you go to district court. You sit in front of a judge appointed by Cox. He says no. You appeal it up to the Utah Supreme Court, all appointed by either Cox or Herbert or Levitt. And they say, you're an idiot, get out. And we get finally to the United States Supreme Court, which is where my case is now. And we're hoping for some semblance of at least some independence, I guess, an independent review on that. And we're hoping for those things. But the whole issue of this is, you lose elections this way, but you do expose a lot of corruption. And running as a write-in candidates don't have much of a chance of winning, but it keeps me in the fight. It keeps me on people's mind. And in the process, we continue to expose corruption. And so now what you've got is a lot of people saying, I don't know what's going on here, but I know I don't want Spencer Cox.
They didn't want him last time.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that voted for him.
So that is our biggest, I always say that Spencer Cox is our biggest campaign driver, because people don't want Spencer Cox. And now they're saying, it looks like we're going to have Spencer Cox unless there's somebody else. And that's where the writing comes in. People are so afraid, according to Spencer's own polls, they say that Brian King has no chance in this race, unless they're talking about Phil Lyman. That's like, oh, with Phil Lyman here, he's going to throw the race to Brian King. How horrible would that be? I loved Matt Lusty's, that's the campaign manager, by the way. And he says, we're going to end up with a governor with Gavin Newsom style politics. It's like, well, that's Governor Cox. He is the governor with Gavin Newsom style politics. Brian King doesn't have Gavin Newsom style politics. So the people that say, we don't want a Democrat, then they really can in good conscience vote for Spencer Cox, because he is not a Republican.
I think it's really important that, as much as you can. First of all, I want to say, I know absolutely how brutal running for office is. So thank you for doing that. It's tough.
Yeah.
And I will say it's traumatic. It's very traumatic, because even the people that you think have your back can betray you. And it's really rough. But important that Cox does get exposed. And for that, thank you for holding that platform to expose it. Cox has got such a laundry list. Dirt.
Yeah.
As far as his contracts and what he's involved with from the United Nations, Biden elected 7 governors during the to have, Cox was one of those. I mean, he's so closely aligned with Biden and the Harris administration that it's actually frightening. And Zelensky coming out to hang out with Cox. I mean,
That should tell you everything you need to know.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say it. Are they like bedroom buddies? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a little bit odd, alarming, and frightening the amount of people. Utah is on a global scene. We are the poster child for some of the most corrupt things from the United Nations and World Economic Forum, and we're the perfect place to do it because of that culture I keep going back to. But Cox is facilitating it. And that's the issue. They have to have Cox in there. This is not just fair and honest elections.
Right.
This is about a global agenda that has tons of things coming down the line, and Cox has very much facilitated it. They have to have their boy in there.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going just against Cox. You're going against a global system, Phil.
Yeah.
Yeah. This disagree better. Cox takes full credit for it. It came from Rachel Kleinfeld, Carnegie Institute fellow. And that's who runs the National Governors Association, is the Carnegie Institute. Rachel Kleinfeld came from that. She grew up in Alaska. Alaska was the initial attempt, I guess, at implementing these communist ideas in a formerly Republican state, and they've turned Alaska pretty blue. And she says right in one of her things that, what we need is more flavors of Republicans and ranked choice voting. That's what we need in order to get Democrats into offices in these blue states. And that's exactly what Utah's fighting for. That's exactly what Cox is fighting for. He is not on our side. He's on their side. Just as you say, Alena, he is their asset. He's not Utah's asset.
Right.
He works for the globalists. He works for the global agenda. He's committed to everything that they're committed to. He joined the Biden's climate corps, joined forces. The only Republican governor that did that. He made the commitment to implement DEI, and that was contingent on masking our kids. Got $1 billion for the governor's office, contingent on masking our kids and signing the DEI compact, which he did. And it just goes on. And then he's in the middle of Nomi Health and health contracts and friends who have no experience in biology or medicine that are running these massive companies for testing. And it's the more you dig, the more you find out you are dealing with a bottomless pit. And he is not a Utah advocate.
He's not.
Until it comes right up to the election. And now he's like, oh, we're going to fight for our public lands. It's like, oh, what have you been doing the last 8 years, Spencer, as the lieutenant governor and now the governor?
That is a page book right out of the Democrats' playbook.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
sound like Harris. Now
what's that?
Doesn't that sound like Harris flipped it? That now she cares about the border.
And it's juvenile. You watch this, it's like you're dealing with like elementary school mentality of the politics going on in Utah. And then you get, and then like you say, then you get to say, all we want is peace and joy and everybody be nice, and we're.
Well, that's out of the communist playbook too. It's,
so.
to disillusion and wear people down. And then people will eventually give in on some issues that they wouldn't have given in 5 years ago, 4 years ago, a year ago, because they're just exhausted.
Well, and along that lines, and I keep going way off point here, James, but
You're good.
but the idea that now we're running as a write-in, and what happens is a write-in, another write-in pops up with the last name Lyman.
Yes.
That was.
And we're getting what we think is fairly credible information that it was the Cox campaign team that recruited them and paid them according to the text that we have. And I don't know the answer to these. I'm not the investigator, but you put those texts over to the mainstream media. They sit on it. They're not doing anything. And when I call and say, are you going to break this story? Are you going to investigate it? Can you tell me what you're finding out? You just know at that point, no, they're not going to come out with a story that Cox paid Richard Lyman to run as a write-in campaign, they're going to run a story that says Phil Lyman falsely alleges that the Cox campaign did this. And I'm like, I'm not alleging anything. All I know is I've been damaged because now there's a Lyman on this after we spend $1.5 million promoting the Lyman name. And all of these things are so, they're just so baked into the corrupt environment in Utah that somehow people are supposed to like turn a blind eye to that, not pay attention. And then like you say, the fatigue, and people are feeling like, oh, I just want to all this to go away and just be happy. And it's like, well, I've got news for you. If you don't do something about it, it's
Right.
going to get really ugly.
That's a war game. And I tell people, stay frosty, because the war game is to wear you down.
Yeah.
You've got to take your breaks and come back in the game. Don't let them get to you. It's psychological.
We're so
Don't
gaslit.
you have a video on your, for those of you who haven't seen it, Phil's on Twitter. And there's a video of somebody knocking on this Lyman's door, right? And he admitted his mother was the one that orchestrated this whole thing. So he literally admitted it, and it's on film. So go to Phil's Twitter page and find that and share that with your Utah friends, because
we weren't responsible or involved in that video. It came out and we shared it after a while.
Right.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, and Bill, you bring up a really good point, and that's where I was getting at with my campaign. I mean, I raised quite a bit of money, and back in 2022, it was 30,000 was a lot for a home race.
Yeah.
Ella Harding that went against Trevor Lee, she had people getting her 100,000. And so you're bringing up the point that 1.5 million for you. I mean, it's getting unachievable for the regular person to even run for office, because the financial, we don't have media on our side. We don't have the establishment on our side. We don't have even the culture on our side a lot of the times. And now we don't have the finances.
Yeah.
And it makes it really tough for the average person. It is discouraging, because in every single way, now they've bypassed the caucus system. So in every single way, they're destroying our elections.
Yeah. So a couple things I just want to touch on here. We can wrap things up here in the next few minutes, but you guys saw, for those of you who are watching, I got a little ticker on the bottom, right? For those of you who live in Utah and you're going to be voting, get a paper ballot. Hand fill out your ballot. Don't go to the machines. Get a paper ballot. Write in Phil Lyman, Natalie Clausen for lieutenant governor. There's that. You saw that space right underneath those governors there for the write-in. The only way that this is going to have any set chance or a slim hope of success is if the majority of us do that. Now, there's always been the flip side of that, and I think you guys talked about this while I had to step away for a second, was, well, geez, if you write in, and then that's going to draw all the votes to the Democrat thing. It's like, I don't know that that's going to be necessarily the case. But I'm looking at it. What we have now is not any better than what the Democrat is. In reality is a Democrat governor in a Utah Republican House and Senate is not going to be able to do anything he wants anyway. So let's get the right man in there for the job, and that is Phil Lyman. So write that in there. So, Alena, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, and weren't you saying, Phil, that Brian King would be better than Cox?
Exactly.
Well, the thing I hate to see is someone that lies and cheats and then goes after anybody that accuses him and still can just claim the position without proving any of that. That would be a travesty for,
Right.
And honestly, it'd be a travesty after all the betrayals that we've had from Cox, from using his pronouns to masking the kids to all of this stuff. It would be a travesty if he didn't legitimately win for him to take office. So I don't want an illegitimate victor in that governor's seat. And as far as, I won't say that Brian King would be better than Spencer Cox, because Brian King, wants to kill babies. He's pro-abortion. He's got some things that are hard, but I've never been lied to by Brian King. I've never had him, and I've never been told the truth from Spencer Cox. So yeah, there's
Well,
literally
really quick. is sanctuary state that we are.
Yeah.
I mean, we just had an attack in Kaysville by Venezuelan coming in and attacking a family with a baseball bat. I think that's at least one of 3. And, Cox is bringing these people in without the consent of the people. And we have no problem with immigration, right? We have no problem with people who want to come here and make the most out of their lives. But we want to make sure they're coming for the right reasons and that they are safe and they're not criminals or they're not part of the cartel. And so where the people are we the priority for Cox? I don't think so.
Yeah.
And so very much so, just as much as the nation has an open border, Utah has an open border. And a lot of those people are, again, playing into the kindness of the people in the state, right? And so we have to be careful with that. But we just have to mention that Cox has kept and lied about us being a sanctuary state.
Right.
Yeah, he absolutely has. So, all right. So we got a few questions here. Let's jump into these real quick. So this is more of a statement than a question. Really, Toko says, I'm not a citizen, but my wife will be voting for you, Phil. Thank you, really, Toko. But
She did ask, or she or he asked a
He did
question.
ask this question. How can we help here in St. George?
St. George has been great. Washington County has been really active for us. And it's interesting. I think you brought up at the beginning of the show, James, we went down to an event, a thank you event, picnic, and we were informed that if you wear a Lyman shirt at that event, you'll be arrested for trespassing. And I clarified.
Hey, whoa. Back the freight train up. Where was this event?
It was in St. George.
Where particularly is what I'm trying to get
at Worthen Park.
Okay. Is Worthen Park owned by the city or is it open to the public?
It is. Well, it's open to the public. I think it's owned by the city.
Okay.
But it's a public park. And
so it's a public park, then you cannot be trespassed on a public park. I don't care who you are. I'm just going to go back to the United States Supreme Court case of what was it, Shuttlesworth versus Birmingham. That was the landmark Supreme Court case where people were trying to preach on the street, and the city said you had to have a permit to preach on the street, and they said no, that infringes on their First Amendment right to free speech and to gather publicly. So, one of the law enforcement people said that they had established a free speech zone there that we were free to go there, and I said, America is a free speech zone. The entire country is a free speech zone.
So he said, and this is where you hate to start like pitting yourself against the GOP, because I'm a Republican. I'm a proud member of the Republican Party, and that's what I kept telling. I called the organizer down there and said, I'm grateful to Washington County. I'm a Republican. I want to come. We've got candidates. I've got delegates there that are supporting us. She sent out an email that if you support Phil Lyman, if you're in any leadership in the GOP in Washington County, you'll be asked to resign. And it's like, okay, well, you're making this into a turf battle, and I feel an obligation to come down and support. And we did, and they put up little flags across the lawn. It's like, well, if you cross this flag, this line, you'll be arrested. And they had volunteers that they had given yellow jackets to of the delegates that are walking around there, and what was it? Pro-Life Utah came and asked, "Hey, will you come over to our booth and take photos?" And I said, "Well, I will. If you're inviting me, I will." And they said, "We know that they said they're going to trespass you, but we're inviting you." So I went over to their booth. It's right in the middle of the whole thing, and for 10 minutes there, we were taking pictures and stuff. And I look over, and these guys with the yellow jackets are huddled up with the police officers pointing over there in a real dilemma as to what do we do? It's like, here they are. We said they can't wear Lyman for Utah shirts, and I've got my Lyman for governor shirt on, and they were having a little bit of a moral dilemma, which is a really scary thing. And I mean, shame on Republicans who would even entertain that whole nonsense. And it was a really bad look for the Washington County GOP. And I hope the thing that bothers me is a lot of the delegates were like, well, I'm just going to resign my seat. And I said, no, don't resign your seat. Just go get a new a new chair, get some new leadership, get some people in there with a little bit of backbone who will stand up for America. I mean, this is just so wrong. And then the other thing that Utah County did, and I don't mean to ramble on here, but I love their resolution or their motion was that we will support Spencer Cox as the nominee when he verifies his signatures and the results of the election. It's like, that's fair. That's good. I'll support him too if he'll verify that he won that he got his signatures and won the election. It's so simple.
Legitimately.
Yeah. And that's Christy Henshaw for you. I mean, she's so awesome. And I do have, like, even in one of my campaigns, Representative Mike Peterson, he was met by his GOP that gave him havoc because he wanted to give me a few minutes to be able to speak and address the people up there. And they're like, we don't want her to talk. Why are you letting her talk? He goes, why wouldn't I? And so he told me that later. I'm like, you know what? Good for you. I mean, when nobody was threatened with an arrest, and you're in this ridiculous you're describing, but this is happening all over. So
Mike Peterson's one of those guys without guile and without a mean bone in his body who will stand up for you to the nth degree. He's got a backbone. He's just, best legislator, one of the best legislators we've ever seen.
Yeah. This isn't really a question, but this is more of a statement. And I do want to get your take on this because this has been an area of hot topic recently. So Joe Spinella talks about Mitch Vexler, a real estate developer that's in court in Denton County, Texas, and he has unearthed massive property tax fraud being committed by the state's tax assessors. So I want to get your thoughts on, first, property taxes in general. Does the state have a right to A, tax your property that's not commercially based property, and B, if they can they take your property away from you if you don't pay your taxes? I think those are the bigger questions. A little bit of a loaded question there for you, but
well, yeah, I mean, property taxes are the most regressive tax we've ever seen, and we accept them as a way to raise revenue. They're supposed to be county level taxes, and agreed to by the county and the county assessor. And this is another area where even if they are legitimate, they're being taken over by the state and being driven by the state.
Yeah.
And and there are some massive schemes going on right now. Wasatch County is in the middle of a huge ordeal because they came in and valued property that was worth about $490,000. They valued it at $490 million. Went through and based their budget on this hugely inflated evaluation, set all their budgets so they didn't have to go through truth and taxation. And then when they came back and corrected the error, then their response to all the taxpayers was, "Oh, sorry, your taxes have to go up to correct for the error that we made." And so their taxes in Wasatch County have tripled in the last 3 years. And it's a scheme. It's like, if that was an honest mistake, you'd go back and say, "Oh, all those raises we just gave to all the commissioners and the clerks and everything, we're going to have to roll those back." But no, it's like, nope, you guys are stuck with it now. And it's a way to get around, like, say, that truth in taxation. We've seen massive real estate schemes going on in Arizona, and to benefit, certain members of the syndicate or the cartel that run that. And there's no reason to believe that it's not happening wide scale in Utah. And property taxes, at the end of the day, they are unconstitutional. Our founding fathers would never have put up with the idea that you don't own your property. But
well, I mean, and that's why I'm saying is it just the comment you made earlier where you said that judge in the court said, "Get that Constitution out of here," right? Because again, what part of the Constitution reigns supreme? Because here in Utah, Article 1, Section 1, which is the very first one, and this is how every state's constitution is listed, and this is how the federal constitution should have been listed, but they didn't think of it at the time. Every state constitution starts Article 1, Section 1, which is a declaration of all of the citizens of that state's rights. These rights, these are the people that live in the state. These are your rights. All people who live in the state have the right to life, liberty, and property, to acquire, possess, and protect property. There's also a right in there that says you cannot be deprived of that property without due process of law. And what have we decided as due process of law? Well, there's got to be a judicial situation. Someone's got to bring a legal claim against you. We've talked about this before. So my question is then how is it on one hand? Because again, I'm reviewing my state's constitution, and it's clear as day. I went back to the constitution that was ratified in their constitutional convention of 1890. What was that? Was it 96 that we became a state? So it would have been
96 became a state. So it might have been 96 or 95 when they
95, something like that. Yeah. So I'm looking at the Constitution as it was originally, by its original intent. Go back to our show last week. We talked about the original intent. And it says in here, all property in the state, comma, not exempt under the laws of the United States or under this Constitution, shall be taxed in proportion to its value. Okay, so why do you think that the founders of our state would have put in that little clause, or under this Constitution? What do you think they meant by that? Well, geez, I go back to Article 1, Section 1. All the people have a right to acquire, possess, and protect property. Does that not mean that property is exempt under this Constitution? I mean, it doesn't take a scholar.
Yeah.
So, but it's like my daughter, my 14-year-old daughter, I love her to death. She's hilarious. She always, when she's trying to do her homework, she's like, Dad, the math is not mathing. The math is not mathing. So to your point, and that's exactly the fraud that Mitch Wexler has unearthed. These county assessors are horribly inflating the values so they can drive more revenue. And what they're doing is they're making people homeless, and they're doing it under the. I mean, does this make sense to anyone? Would our founders have ever? Would we, the people, have ever granted the authority to our governing body to make us homeless if we don't fund the government?
Well,
does that make sense to anyone?
it goes back to the United Nations and Agenda 30.
Yes.
17 goals, and that is you will own nothing and be happy about it.
Right. They want to rent. They tax you out of your homes. So
Yeah.
it's if you want to go the haves versus the have-nots, it's actually a scheme in that arena because they create their little playgrounds around the country. I used to live in the Hamptons. They did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry Seinfeld came in and bought Billy Joel's house for 3 times its worth. So instead of 3 million, it was 9 million. And then the taxes went sky high and people lost their 3rd and 4th generation farmland and stuff in this valuable area and could no longer afford to keep it. So now they've got their playground out in the Hamptons and there's no locals and riffraff or whatever, but you see it over and over again, you know?
Well,
I mean, they did it in Park City here as well. It's, you know, they doubled the taxes since last year.
we in Davis County.
Huh?
Our taxes, our property taxes about quadruple the last.
Quadrupled. Yeah.
Yeah. So statewide, I think.
Yeah.
It's a serious problem, and it's one that there've been a number of people, myself included, have taken this question to the court, right? And again, this is where we were not really understanding the procedures, and what we did is we took things to the, you know, you're seeing a lot of people go, hey, the state is infringing on my right to own property. They're violating the federal rights of taxation, right? There's imposts and ex-posts are the only two uniform and apportion taxes, and they're not again, the math is not mathing, as my daughter would say. So they take it to federal court, and what does federal court do? Well, they just kick the can down the road and say, oh, well, there's that federal law that says you can't challenge state taxes in the federal court. You got to go to the state. So if you go to the state and federal and challenge the state taxation in state courts, do you think you're going to have any redress or grievance there? I mean, does it make sense at all anywhere? So it's this never-ending vicious cycle of we are sick and tired of seeing. I mean, fortunately, Utah's not as bad as some of the states, but I have friends in New Jersey and California and other places where, I mean, they're sitting on homes that are 1/3 of the size of the home I have, and their taxes are 5 times as high as what I am. So how again, how is it that you can say that we live in the freest nation on earth when our government, who supposedly is for the people, by the people, and of the people, will come throw us out of our house if we can't pay the tax bill?
Because they get paid handsomely to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, George Carlin hit the nail on the head. He said it's a really big club and you ain't in it.
You ain't in
They
it.
don't care about you. You are being played, and we are being played. And it doesn't matter what, I mean, it goes from property taxes to our education system, to our healthcare system. We are being played. I mean, our food is under attack. Our water is under attack. It's just, and I, you know, the beautiful thing, really, people are waking up to this stuff. People, you know, you get these little pockets of, it's like I was talking to a group of people out in Wasatch County again, and I said it feels kind of like Atlas Shrugged, and oh man, they love that because they feel like they're living this Atlas Shrugged moment where all the producers, all the people that actually produce stuff, are getting to a point where they just say, you know, for a time maybe we'll just walk away and let the whole bureaucratic apparatus collapse under its own dysfunction, because they're so dysfunctional. These people that are making all these rules. I mean, I was in committee and on the floor of the House, and one of the legislators said, well, we have all the knowledge and all the information at the state level to manage the water. These little communities, they don't know how to do it.
Oh, give
Like,
me
the farmers and the ranchers who built the canal system apparently just didn't know what they were doing. They just, dumb luck, they happened to create this water system that's worked for the last 150 years, but no longer. I mean, it's just
tapped springs and ran 5 to 10 miles worth of pipeline, and they don't know what they're doing.
And when has the government ever come in a space like that and made an improvement to the system? They don't do it. They destroy it. It gets worse, and people fill their pockets and they go on their merry way. And people are waking up to it. If not now, they will soon. So
they are for sure.
But, you know, they're waking up to it. But again, I'm going to hit the culture, because they're waking up to. I remember in my campaign, there was a young college student who came and one of my cottage meetings, and she said, what would you do about the unaffordable housing? I can't afford a house. I said, okay. I says, the government doesn't have anything that it doesn't first take from you. So, do you trust yourself with your money better than you trust the government? Do you want to spend your money, or do you want the government to spend your money for you? Because we've got to get out of that mindset of people waking up. Is it an appeal to the government to change, or is it an appeal to themselves to create change?
Right.
Because that's where we need to go. You said it exactly right, Phil. The government doesn't improve upon it. Doesn't make it better.
Nothing. You know, to that point, Alena, the communities we live in are such good people and such good communities, and we take care of ourselves. I mean, I think about even the community right here that I live in, where somebody within the community has had something happen, either an accident, an illness, or something of that nature, and they all rally around and they set up GoFundMe pages and they do all these things to help them. That is how we act. That is how we operated as a nation, all the way, if you can believe this, all the way up until 1933. That is how we operated as a nation. We took care of each other.
I was just actually in Tennessee when Helene was in its firing destructive path, and I had no idea, because I was protected by the Appalachian Mountains. I had no idea that an hour from me, Asheville was being obliterated.
Wow.
Had a lot of heavy rain, but you see FEMA denying churches and denying businesses coming in and helping those people. Those people are making a difference because the people themselves are coming together.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a real testament across the board that we got to stop waiting around for government to save us. We need to get up and start making those changes ourselves.
What wasn't it a story or something where this woman is caught in a serious flood, and she climbs up to the top of her roof of her house and she starts praying to God, God, please save me. Some guys come by in a boat and says, do you need help? And she's like, no, God's going to save me. So they take off. Somebody comes along in a helicopter, says, hey, I'm here to rescue you. She says, no, it's okay. God's going to save me. So they take off, and then the flood waters come up and she drowns. And she gets up to heaven and she looks God in the face. She said, God, I prayed to you. I asked for you to save me. And he said, hey, you idiot, I sent you a boat and a helicopter. What more do you want?
Yes,
But
God works through people.
The point is that if we are we are people who take care of our own. We do rally around and we do unite around certain things. And when we help each other, we create that community that we all want to have, and we want our kids to grow up in. We want, and that's why I love, like, I've been fortunate to have had a job where I've been able to travel and see this great nation. I've seen every state of this great nation except for Alaska, and that one's coming up here pretty quick. So I will have been to every single state, and there's not a state that I would rather live in more than here in Utah. But I am concerned. And, you know, one man's not going to save us. Phil is not the savior. He's not going to save us. And if he doesn't get into the governor's office, then we're doomed. That's not what I'm saying. We need to start stepping up and take things on our own. You know, there's things that people can do. There's things that we can do. And it's until we start standing up and fighting for our rights, like I'm helping my friend down in Salt Lake County, like others say, is like, hey, you just need to take a step back and go, well, wait a minute. By what authority are you asking me to do this? Like Phil and that group down in southern Utah, when they wanted to show up at this event, well, if you come here, you're going to be trespassed. Really? On what authority? Because I have a right to be here. And you cannot make a law, an ordinance, or a rule that would abrogate that right, says Miranda versus Arizona. So do you want to go down that road? Let's go down that road. Because what I'm seeing from the United States Supreme Court is finally some constitutional original rulings. Getting rid of the Chevron Deference was the big one. But that's not all of them. There's still more. So I am curious, Phil, to know the suit that you have before the Supreme Court. From my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, and this relates to where you are with your campaign, did the district court, the Court of Appeals, and the Utah State Supreme Court, did they all say you didn't have standing? Is that what their basis was?
No, no, the Supreme Court of Utah, we went straight there. They just said that this case had been heard and decided before. And then they quoted a bunch of stuff that was not at all relevant to our case.
Oh, okay.
And said, so they just denied our case. They didn't hear it. They didn't have a hearing.
They just denied your writ for certiorari.
Yeah. And then apparently there's an appeals process, which we opted to not go through the appeals of the Utah Supreme Court because it was heard by them. It can go straight to the U.S. Supreme Court. So that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, that's what I told my friend. I said, where we are with your case in the district court, if these judges are all going to rally around their own, okay, that's fine. We're going to follow the process. We'll go to the Court of Appeals. We'll go to the state Supreme Court. I'm not expecting anything there. The slimmer of hope is at the United States Supreme Court. But we have to create that major federal question. We have to create something of substance, and we have to be that. You got to be willing to be for lack of a better term, the guinea pig.
Yeah.
But this isn't just happening to him. This isn't just happening to Phil. It's happening to people all over this country. And you have to present that question in a way, because you know how many cases go through the United States Supreme Court? Thousands. And they only hear, 500 or 600 cases in a year, if that.
Right.
So you've got to present your issue. You got to present your question in a way that is a major federal question, and one that affects the right of every American, and not just little old me here in little old Ogden, Utah. Well, it's not so little anymore. It's bigger than Blanding. Yeah. But anyway, so we're coming up right on the 2-hour mark, Phil. I just want to give you the last remarks, or whatever you want to say. We had a couple of more questions here. They weren't really questions. They were more statements. I do want to just point out to everybody who put in comments or questions, thank you all. We really appreciate you guys doing this. So, Phil, anything you want to, what can we do to help? I mean, we talked about writing your name in, as well as your running mate, Natalie Clausen.
Yeah. So I will say, from the beginning, ours has been kind of a David versus Goliath fight. And I feel like we've won that fight in a really big way by showing what was going on. And it continues to go. We'd love to be able to win the governor's seat, because we would do some amazing things for Utah. And I think it would kind of affect Idaho and Colorado and the whole West, and on the public lands front, and energy and nuclear energy, all those things. But we've won such a major such a major victory already. And if people are willing to donate money, some people have money and they can donate it. We're still spending a lot right now, coming down to the wire on that. So Lyman for Utah, that's FOR Utah, they can go there. But really, I think it's just talking to your neighbors, letting people know that I guess something big is going to happen in Utah, and it's in God's hands. And whether it's now or down the road, I think there's lots of reasons for optimism because we are seeing the truth. And I look forward to taking this fight. And if it's another 20-year fight, it'll be a good fight, and it's the right fight to be in. And so we just appreciate your fighting spirit, and so yeah, let's just keep it going.
Awesome. Well, guys, I'm going to wrap it up then. Thank you so much for joining us, Phil. Really do appreciate your time.
Hold on, James.
Yes.
I just want to put in there, some of the community is doing some campaigning for you on the overpasses. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
But can you just state the locations there, James? I think I sent you the.
Yeah, let's see here, because you were texting me those.
So it's on the 11th from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. and it's overpass 263. I have the. I'll post the graphic in our chat.
Yeah, this is put on by the Utah Patriots group. Good people. And they're going to be, on October the 11th from 5:30 to 7 o'clock. They're going to be down in 263, which is in Provo over I-15. 275, which is in Linden. And then exit 293, which is a little further north up in Sandy. So there's a lot of people that drive over those underpasses, millions of cars daily. So they're putting out their write-in Lyman for governor. Remember, it's Phil Lyman, not the other one. Yep, there it is. There's the picture you can kind of see.
I'll put it in our chat on Affidavits 101.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone who joined us live. Alena, thank you for being here. I'm so glad you came.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you were able to join us.
Thanks for having me. And Phil, it was good to be with you.
You too, Alena. Thanks.
So, Phil, anything you want to sign off on before we jump off?
No, just a huge thank you to you and to everybody else that's fighting the fight.
Awesome. Well, we love you. God bless you. We're with you. More importantly, we just want to. I think I go back to the words of our founding fathers: is we just want to secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and for our posterity, and we can't do that unless we look tyranny what it is right in its face, and we just confront it. So let's start confronting it. So, all right, you guys, with that, we'll sign off. Hopefully we can get another show out later this week. If not, it'll be next week. Take care, guys.
Right. Thanks.
See you later.